The stars themselves whispered his name in fear. Vexstar, the apex hunter, moved through the darkness of space like death itself. Every creature in the galaxy knew his story, and every warrior trembled at the thought of facing him. He stood 9 feet tall, with skin like black metal and eyes that burned like dying suns. His ship was a tomb filled with the bones of things that should not exist. For 3,000 years, Vexstar had hunted the impossible. He killed void serpents that swam between dimensions. Their skulls now decorated his trophy room like twisted crowns. He ripped the hearts from plasma dragons while they still burned with stellar fire. Those hearts sat in crystal cases glowing with the light of dead stars. He fought dimension stalkers that could step through reality itself. Their claws hung on his walls like deadly art. No prey had ever escaped him. No hunt had ever failed. The Galactic Council called him when they faced things that made armies run away. Screaming pirates told stories of his hunts to frighten children. Entire species changed their migration routes to avoid the systems where he worked. His name was spoken in 100 languages, and in every one it meant the same thing: death that could not be stopped. On a small blue planet called Earth, in a city named Sol, Kim Tae-ho walked to work like he did every morning. He was 32 years old, with gentle eyes and hands that had never hurt anything on purpose. His veterinary clinic sat between a flower shop and a small restaurant where the owner always saved him soup when he worked late. The morning air was cold, and he pulled his coat tighter as he unlocked the door. Inside the clinic, 3 cats waited for him in the recovery room. One had been hit by a car the week before. The second had been born with a twisted leg that he had fixed with surgery. The third was just old and sick and had nowhere else to go. Tae-ho fed them first before checking his appointment book. A dog with a broken tail, a bird with a damaged wing, a rabbit that had stopped eating, all small problems that he could fix with patience and care. His neighbors called him the animal whisperer because even the meanest dogs became calm when he touched them. Street cats that hissed at everyone else would purr in his arms. Wounded birds would stop struggling when they heard his voice. He never understood why animals trusted him so easily. He just knew that every living thing deserved kindness. The children in the neighborhood loved him too. They brought him injured beetles and sick hamsters. Sometimes they brought him healthy pets just because they wanted to watch him work. His hands moved like magic when he examined an animal, always gentle, always careful. He could calm a frightened creature faster than anyone could explain. That morning brought him a special case. Mrs. Park from the apartment building had found a dog in the alley behind her home. The animal was thin and scared, with matted fur and cuts on its face. It must have been living on the streets for months. Every time someone tried to help it, the dog would run away or try to bite. But when Tae-ho knelt down and spoke softly, the dog came to him like they were old friends. He spent an hour cleaning the dog's wounds and checking for diseases. The animal never tried to bite or struggle. It seemed to understand that he was trying to help. When he was finished, the dog licked his hand and wagged its tail for the first time in who knows how long. Mrs. Park cried with happiness and promised to give the dog a good home. Tae-ho felt the same joy he always felt when he saved a life. It did not matter if the animal was big or small, expensive or worthless. Every life had value. Every creature deserved a chance to be happy. He could not imagine living any other way. Far across the galaxy, on a mining planet called Zarian 7, something terrible was happening. The miners had been working deep underground for months, digging rare metals from the planet's core. Everything had been normal until they broke through into an ancient chamber hidden in the rock. What they found there changed everything. The first miner to disappear was named Gorlex. He was working the night shift when his team heard him scream over the radio, then silence. When the morning crew went looking for him, they found only his helmet and tools scattered across the tunnel floor. There was no body, no blood, no sign of what had taken him. 3 more miners vanished over the next week. Each time it was the same scream in the darkness, then nothing. The mining companies sent security teams into the tunnels, but they found nothing. The cameras showed only empty corridors and shadows that seemed to move when no one was looking. The few miners brave enough to keep working reported strange sounds in the walls, scratching, whispering, something that sounded almost like breathing. The security footage from the deep tunnels showed glimpses of something impossible. A shape that moved like liquid shadow flowing across the walls and ceiling. It was there one moment and gone the next. Too fast for the cameras to capture clearly. When enhanced, the images showed something that made hardened soldiers quit their jobs and leave the planet. The creature was not like anything in the galactic databases. It moved without making sound except when it wanted to be heard. It could become solid enough to kill or transparent enough to pass through walls. It seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once, never fully in any one reality. Its very presence made people feel cold inside, as if their life force was being drained away. Within 2 weeks, half the mining crew had fled. Those who stayed were too scared to work the expensive mining operation ground to a halt. Corporate executives demanded answers. Security companies refused to send more teams. The few experts brave enough to study the footage could only shake their heads and recommend that the planet be abandoned. The mining company CEO knew he had only one option left. There was only one being in the galaxy who might be able to handle something this dangerous. It would cost more money than most planets made in a year, but what choice did he have? He sent a message across the galaxy to a ship that traveled between the stars hunting things that should not exist. The message was simple. We have a problem that cannot be solved by normal means. We offer any price you name to make it stop, please. Help us. 3 days later, the response came back in words that chilled the blood of everyone who read them. Your problem interests me. I will come. Prepare to pay my usual fee. The Galactic Council received the mining company's distress call at the same time they learned that Vexstar had accepted the contract. Emergency sessions were called. Ambassadors from 100 worlds gathered to discuss what this meant. If Vexstar was involved, the situation was worse than anyone had imagined. In his small clinic on Earth, Tejo finished treating his last patient of the day. It was a cat with an infected paw. Nothing serious, but the animal had been in pain. He gave it medicine and gentle words until it felt better. The cat's owner cried with relief and thanked him over and over as if he had saved the world as night fell over Seoul. Tejo locked up his clinic and walked home through streets filled with people living normal, happy lives. They did not know that somewhere in the stars, the most dangerous hunter in the galaxy was preparing for a battle that would shake the foundations of reality. They did not know that their peaceful little world was about to become part of a story that would change everything. Above their heads, stars twinkled in patterns that had remained the same for millions of years, but change was coming to the galaxy. Change that would begin with an act of kindness. So simple that no one would think it important at first, yet that act would echo across space and time until even legends would kneel before its power. Vexstar's ship cut through space like a blade through silk. The Dark Reaper was his home and his weapon, built from the metal of dead stars and powered by the core of a dying planet. Inside its black halls walked the most feared being in the galaxy. But for the first time in 3,000 years, something troubled his mind. The reports from Zarian 7 made no sense. Creatures that could phase between dimensions were not unknown to him. He had hunted them before, and their skulls decorated his trophy room, but this thing was different. The security footage showed something that should not exist, something that made even his ancient instincts whisper warnings. His ship's computer had analyzed every frame of the recordings. The creature moved like liquid shadow, but struck with the force of a falling star. It seemed to exist in multiple realities at once, never fully solid, never completely gone. The miners described feeling cold when it was near, as if their very life was being drained away. This was not the behavior of any predator. In his vast experience of Vexstar stood in his trophy room, surrounded by the remains of things that had once terrorized entire star systems. Void serpent skulls hung from the ceiling, their empty sockets still seeming to watch him. The crystallized heart of a plasma dragon pulsed with dying light on a pedestal of black stone dimension. Stalker claws were arranged like deadly flowers in cases of indestructible glass. Each trophy told a story of a hunt that had ended in victory. Each bone and scale and fang represented a creature that had thought itself beyond death until it met him. He was the apex predator, the thing that hunted the hunters, the death that came for death itself. Yet something about this new prey made him feel uncertain. For the first time in millennia, meanwhile, on the small blue planet called Earth, Kim Tejo was dealing with his own mystery. 2 nights ago, he had been hiking in the mountains outside Seoul. It was something he did often to clear his mind and enjoy the peace of nature. The forest was quiet except for the sound of wind in the trees and small animals moving through the underbrush. That peace was shattered by a sound like thunder. A bright light had streaked across the sky and crashed into the mountainside with tremendous force. Tejo had run toward the impact site thinking someone might need help. What he found there changed his understanding of the universe forever. A ship lay broken among the trees. Unlike anything he had ever seen, it was made of metal that seemed to shift color in the moonlight, shaped like a teardrop with strange symbols carved into its hull. Smoke rose from cracks in its surface, and strange lights flickered through transparent panels. Tejo approached carefully, unsure if it was safe inside the wreckage. He found her. The alien was small compared to the stories he had heard about space travelers. She stood barely 5 feet tall, with pale blue skin and silver hair that seemed to move like water. Her clothes were torn and burned from the crash, and green liquid that might have been blood seeped from cuts on her arms and face. Most people would have run away or called the authorities. Tejo did what he always did when he found something hurt. He helped. The alien tried to speak, but her words were in a language he did not understand. Her eyes were wide with fear and pain, but when Tejo knelt beside her and spoke in gentle tones, she seemed to calm down. He had no idea how to treat alien injuries, but wounds were wounds, whether they belonged to a cat or a creature from the stars. Using supplies from his hiking pack and instincts developed from years of veterinary work, Tejo cleaned and bandaged her injuries. He gave her water and shared his food, speaking softly to keep her calm. The alien watched him with wonder, as if she could not believe what was happening. Over the next few hours, she began to understand his language faster than should have been possible. Her people had translation technology built into their minds. She explained in broken words her name was Crystal, and she was a trader who had been fleeing from pirates when her ship was damaged. She had crashed on Earth by accident and expected to be captured or killed. Instead, she found a human who helped her without asking for anything in return. Tejo brought her to his small apartment in Seoul and set up a bed for her in his spare room. He treated her injuries with the same gentle care he showed to wounded animals, never once asking about her ship or her cargo, or what she might be worth to those who studied aliens. Crystal had traveled to hundreds of worlds and met thousands of different species. In her experience, the strong always dominated the weak. Predators consumed their prey without mercy or hesitation. Resources were fought over until only the victors remained alive. Yet here was a being who used his strength to protect and heal rather than to take and destroy us. Her injuries healed, Crystal told Tejo about the galaxy beyond Earth. She spoke of the galactic council that governed trade between the stars. She described worlds where crystal cities reached into the clouds and others where entire civilizations lived in the hearts of dying suns. She told him about the great hunters and warriors whose names were known across space. When she spoke of Vextar, her voice dropped to a whisper. Every spacer knew his legend, every pirate feared his name. He was the creature that hunted creatures, the being that came when all other options had failed. For 3,000 years, he had stalked across the galaxy, leaving behind him a trail of bones and stories that made children afraid of the dark. Tejo listened to her tales with wonder, but what amazed him most was not the stories of great battles and impossible hunts. What surprised him was how afraid everyone seemed to be. Even Crystal, who had traveled the dangerous trade routes and faced pirates and worse, spoke of the galaxy as a place where only the strong survived. On Earth, things were different. Yes, there were predators and prey, but there was also cooperation and kindness. Humans had learned to live together despite their differences. They built cities where millions could live in peace. They created laws to protect the weak from the strong. They chose leaders who served rather than rulers who conquered. Tejo tried to explain this to Crystal, but she seemed unable to understand how such a system could work. In her experience, someone always had to be in charge through force or fear. The idea that beings could choose to help each other without being forced to do so was foreign to her. It was like describing color to someone who had been blind since birth while they talked and learned from each other. Vextar's ship reached Zarian 7. The mining planet was a brown and gray world stripped bare by centuries of extraction. Its surface was covered with massive machines and deep pits that descended into the planet's core. The few remaining miners huddled in fortified shelters, afraid to venture into the tunnels where their friends had disappeared. Vextar's ship landed near the main mining complex with a sound like rolling thunder. The miners watched from their windows as a figure emerged from the vessel, 9 feet tall and wrapped in armor that seemed to absorb light itself. Vextar walked toward the entrance to the underground tunnels with the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. The mining supervisor met him at the entrance. His hands shook as he gave Vextar the reports and security footage. The apex hunter studied the data with growing interest. This creature was unlike anything he had fought. Before, it did not hunt for food or territory. It seemed to be searching for something specific in the deep tunnels. Analysis of the mining records showed that the disappearances had begun shortly after the crews broke through into an ancient chamber. The miners had found something down there, something old and powerful. They had removed it from its resting place and brought it to the surface for study. That was when the killings started. Vextar examined the artifact they had discovered. It was a crystal the size of a human head that pulsed with internal light. The miners thought it was valuable, but they had no idea what they had really found. Vextar's scanner told him the truth. This was a fragment of the first light, a piece of the original energy that had created the universe. These fragments were incredibly rare and unimaginably powerful. They could bend reality itself when properly used. Most had been lost or destroyed over the eons. Those that remained were hidden in the deepest vaults or the most remote locations. This one had been buried on Zarian 7 for millions of years until the miners accidentally uncovered it. Now, Vextar understood why the creature had come. It was not hunting the miners for food or sport. It wanted the fragment, and if his suspicions were correct, the thing in the tunnels was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. This would not be a simple hunt. This would be a battle for the fate of the galaxy itself. As night fell over both Zarian 7 and Earth, two very different beings prepared for what was to come. Vextar checked his weapons and armor, ready to face the greatest challenge of his long career. Tejo made dinner for himself and his alien guest, never knowing that his quiet life was about to become part of a legend that would echo across the stars. The tunnels beneath Zarian 7 stretched like veins through the planet's heart. Vextar moved through them with the silence of death itself. His armor made no sound against the rocky walls. His breathing was controlled and quiet. 3,000 years of hunting had taught him to become one with the shadows behind him. The mining tunnels told their story of fear. Emergency lights cast red shadows on the walls. Equipment lay abandoned where workers had dropped it, and run scratch marks scarred the metal supports, deep gouges that no normal creature could have made. The air smelled of ozone and something else, something that made his predator instincts scream warnings. The first attack came without warning. One moment Vextar was alone in the tunnel. The next, something struck him with the force of a meteor. He crashed through a support beam and into the wall beyond, leaving a crater in the solid rock. For the first time in millennia, he felt pain, real, bone-deep agony that his armor could not absorb. The creature flowed like liquid darkness across the ceiling. Its form shifted constantly, never quite solid, never completely gone. Eyes like burning stars watched him from a face that was more suggestion than reality. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once, like the whisper of dying worlds. You carry the scent of Death, Hunter. But death means nothing to one who existed before the first star burned. Vextar rolled aside as claws made of crystallized void slashed through the space where he had been lying. His plasma cannon charged and fired a beam hot enough to melt steel. The energy passed through the creature like light through water, but its scream of rage shook dust from the tunnel ceiling. For the first time in his legendary career, Vextar found himself outmatched. This thing was not bound by the normal rules that governed life and death. It existed partially outside reality, able to become solid when it attacked and incorporeal when attacked. In return, his weapons were useless against something that could step between dimensions at will. The battle raged through the tunnels, destroying support beams and collapsing entire sections. Vextar weapon systems cycled through every type of energy he had, but nothing touched the creature. Its attacks came from impossible angles, striking through solid walls or emerging from shadows that should not have existed. When the creature's claws finally found their mark, Vextar felt his armor crack like an eggshell. The wound beneath burned with cold fire that his healing systems could not counter. This was no ordinary injury. This was damage to his very essence, the kind of harm that could never fully heal. For the first time in 3,000 years, the apex hunter retreated. Meanwhile, on Earth, Tejo was learning about the galaxy from Crystal, who had made remarkable progress in healing. Her blue skin had regained its healthy glow, and the cuts on her face had closed without leaving scars. Her people healed faster than humans, she explained, but his careful treatment had prevented infection and made her recovery much easier. She showed him pictures on a device that projected images in the air worlds of ice, where cities were carved from frozen oceans, jungle planets where the trees grew tall enough to touch the clouds, desert worlds where crystal formations sang in the wind. Each image was more beautiful and impossible than the last. "Your world is special, Tejo," she said as they sat on his apartment balcony looking out over Sol's lights. "Most planets in the galaxy are harsh places where only the strong survive. But here predators and prey live side by side. You have something that most worlds lost long ago." "What is that?" he asked. "Peace," she said simply. "Real peace, not just the absence of war, but the presence of something better. When I crashed here, I expected to be captured or killed or sold to the highest bidder. Instead, I found someone who helped me because helping was the right thing to do." Tejo did not understand why this seemed so unusual to her. On Earth, people helped each other all the time. Doctors healed the sick, teachers educated children, firefighters risked their lives to save strangers. It was simply what civilized beings did for each other. Night Crystal received a message on her ship's communication system. The signal was faint and full of static, but she recognized the emergency frequency used by deep space hunters. Her face went pale as she listened to the transmission. "What is wrong?" Tejo asked, seeing her distress. "It is Vexstar," she whispered. "The apex hunter is calling for sanctuary. He says he is wounded and being pursued by something that cannot be killed. He is heading toward the system." Tejo felt his heart race. Crystal had told him stories about Vexstar, the legendary hunter who had never known defeat. If something had wounded him badly enough to make him run, then it was more dangerous than anything that should exist. "We have to warn Earth's governments," Crystal said frantically. "If Vexstar comes here, he will bring that thing with him. Your world is not prepared for a battle like this. Billions could die." But Tejo surprised her with his response. "Then we have to help him. Help him." Crystal stared at him in shock. "Tejo, he is the most dangerous being in the galaxy. He has killed things that entire armies could not stop. You cannot just help someone like that." "Why not?" Tejo asked. "He is wounded and afraid just like any other creature that needs help. It does not matter how strong he is or what he has done before. Right now he needs sanctuary, and we are the only ones who can give it to him." Crystal tried to explain that Vexstar was not like the injured animals Tejo was used to treating. He was a force of nature, a living weapon that had ended the lives of countless beings across the galaxy. But Tejo just shook his head with that gentle stubbornness she had learned to recognize. "Every life has value," he said. Even his 3 days later, Vexstar ship limped into Earth's solar system. Its hull was scarred and blackened from the battle on Zarian 7. Several of its weapon systems were offline, and the hunter inside was wounded in ways that went beyond physical damage. For the first time in his long life, he had run from a fight, and the shame of it burned worse than his injuries. He had expected to find another primitive world that he could use as a temporary base while he planned his next move. Instead, his sensors detected something impossible. A human was standing in an open field outside, Sol broadcasting a message of welcome on the same frequency Crystal had used to guide him home. "My name is Kim Tejo," the human said. "Crystal told me you need help. Please land here. I have prepared a place for your ship." Vexstar could not believe what he was hearing. No being in the galaxy would willingly invite the apex hunter to their world. It was suicide. The creature pursuing him would follow, and the battle would destroy everything in its path. Yet here was this human offering sanctuary to someone he had never met. The landing was rougher than Vexstar would have liked. His ship systems were failing faster than he could repair them. When the hatch opened, he emerged expecting to find armies waiting to capture him, or at least crowds of curious humans come to see the legendary hunter. Instead, he found one small human male standing alone in the field. Tejo was not impressive by galactic standards. He carried no weapons, wore no armor, showed no signs of the genetic modifications that made most spacefaring species dangerous. Yet when he looked at Vexstar, there was no fear in his eyes, only concern for someone who was hurt. "You are wounded," Tejo said in accented but understandable galactic standard. "Please let me help you." Vexstar towered over the human like a mountain over a flower. His presence had made grown warriors weep with terror. His reputation had emptied star systems of all intelligent life. Yet this small being looked up at him and offered help as if they were old friends before Vexstar could respond. The sky above them tore open like fabric. The Void Reaper emerged from dimensional space with a scream that shattered windows across Sol. Its form was more solid, now fed by the fear and life force it had drained from Zarian 7 when it saw the fragment of the first light in Vexstar. Possession. Its rage became a living thing. The first battle on Earth began with the force of a natural disaster. The creature's attack leveled buildings and cracked the ground for miles around. Vexstar fought back with everything he had, but his weapons were still useless against something that existed between realities. The plasma beams and particle cannons passed through it like light through mist, but something strange happened during the fight. The Void Reaper's attacks became less focused on destruction and more like desperate attempts at communication. It would strike at Vexstar, then pause as if waiting for a response. Its movements had a rhythm almost like speech in a language older than words. Teho watched the battle from a safe distance, his mind working as he observed the creature's behavior. He had spent years studying animal psychology, learning to read the body language of creatures that could not speak. In the Void Reaper's attacks, he saw something that neither Vexstar nor the Galactic Council had recognized. This thing was not a mindless monster. It was trying to tell them something important. And whatever message it was trying to send was worth destroying worlds to deliver. The battles on Earth continued for 3 days, but something had changed in their nature. The Void Reaper still attacked with devastating force, but its strikes seemed less random, now more purposeful. Teho noticed that it always paused after each assault, as if waiting for some kind of response that never came. Between fights, Vexstar tried to repair his damaged weapons while Teho treated his wounds. The legendary hunter had never allowed another being to touch him before, but something about the human's gentle hands made him feel safe for the first time in millennia. When Teho worked, the pain seemed to fade, replaced by a warmth that had nothing to do with healing technology. "You are not afraid of me," Vexstar said during one of their quiet moments. "Should I be?" Teho asked as he applied healing gel to a cut on the hunter's arm. "I have killed things that armies could not stop. I am the apex predator. The thing that hunts the hunter's fear is the only reasonable response to my presence." Teho paused in his work and looked up at the towering alien. "You are hurt and far from home. That makes you a patient, not a predator. Right now you need care, not fear." The simple statement hit Vexstar harder than any weapon the Void Reaper had used for 3,000 years. Every being in the galaxy had seen him as death incarnate. Yet this human saw him as just another injured creature in need of help. While Vexstar struggled with these new feelings, Teho was conducting his own investigation. He had asked Crystal to help him access the galactic databases, searching for any information about creatures like the Void Reaper. What he found there challenged everything the galaxy believed about these entities. The oldest record spoke of beings called the Cosmic Guardians, who existed before the first civilizations arose. They were not destroyers, but protectors tasked with maintaining the balance between order and chaos across all realities. Their job was to prevent anyone dimension from consuming the others, keeping the universe stable and safe according to the ancient texts. These guardians were beings of pure energy who could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. They had the power to phase between realities, to become solid or incorporeal at will, and to manipulate the fundamental forces that held the universe together. They were essentially gods dedicated to protecting all life, but something had gone wrong eons ago. An experiment with pure chaos energy had corrupted the Guardians, turning them into the monsters now known as Void Reapers. The corruption had not destroyed their original purpose, but had twisted it into something terrible. They still tried to maintain cosmic balance, but their methods had become destructive rather than protective. The fragment of the first light was not just a powerful artifact. According to the records, it was actually a key component of the cosmic balance system. The original Guardians had created it as a stabilizing force to prevent reality from tearing itself apart. When the fragment was moved from its proper place, the balance was disrupted, causing the kind of dimensional instability that drove the corrupted Guardians to madness. Teho shared his findings with Vexstar, who initially refused to believe them, the apex hunter, had built his entire identity around being the ultimate predator. The idea that his prey might actually be victims of cosmic injustice went against everything he had believed for 3,000 years. These are not guardians, Vexstar insisted as they studied the ancient texts. They are monsters that kill without mercy. I have seen what they do to entire star systems. What if they are both? Tejo asked gently. What if they are guardians trying to do their job, but the corruption makes them do it wrong? What if they are not evil, just sick? The suggestion horrified Vexstar. If the Void Reapers were corrupted guardians, then what did that make him? He had spent millennia hunting and killing beings who might have once been protectors of the galaxy. His legendary career might have been built on the systematic extinction of cosmic law enforcement. That night the Void Reaper returned, but its behavior was different from before. Instead of immediately attacking, it hovered at the edge of the city, its form flickering between dimensions. It seemed to be studying them, watching their interactions with an intelligence that was clearly more than animal. Tejo made a decision that shocked both his companions. He walked out into the open where the creature could see him clearly. Then he did something no one in galactic history had ever tried. He spoke to it not as a monster, but as a being in pain. I know you are hurt, he called out in a voice that carried across the devastated landscape. I know you are trying to do something important, but the sickness inside you makes it come out wrong. Let me help you. The Void Reaper's response was immediate and terrifying. It swept down from the sky with claws extended, ready to tear the small human apart. But at the last moment it stopped just feet from Tejo's face. Its burning eyes stared into his, and for just an instant something miraculous happened. The chaos energy stabilized. The creature's form became solid and clear, revealing what it had once been. A being of incredible beauty, with skin like starlight and eyes that held the wisdom of eons. It was tall and graceful, with features that seemed carved from crystallized music. When it spoke, its voice was like the singing of planets. You see it, it whispered in wonder. You see what I was before the corruption took hold. How is this possible? Because I look for what can be healed instead of what should be destroyed, Tejo replied. You were guardians, once protectors of the cosmic balance. The sickness inside you makes you forget, but your true purpose is still there. The moment lasted only seconds before the corruption reasserted itself. The creature's form dissolved back into chaotic energy, and it fled screaming into the night. But those few seconds had revealed a truth that changed everything. Vexstar stood in stunned silence, processing what he had witnessed. The greatest monster in his experience had been revealed as a victim of circumstances beyond its control. If this was true, then how many other creatures had he killed who were simply trying to fulfill their original purpose? The weight of this possibility brought the legendary hunter to his knees for the first time in his 3,000-year career. He knelt not in defeat, but in the crushing realization that he might have spent his entire existence making the universe a darker place instead of a brighter one. What have I done? He whispered. How many guardians have I killed? How many protectors have I destroyed in my ignorance? Tejo knelt beside the broken hunter and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. The past cannot be changed, he said, but the future is still unwritten. What matters now is what you choose to do with this knowledge. Crystal watched in amazement as the most feared being in the galaxy wept for the first time in millennia. She had traveled across hundreds of worlds and met thousands of different species, but she had never seen anything like this moment. A simple veterinarian from a primitive planet had accomplished what armies and governments could know. Had shown the apex hunter mercy. Over the next several hours, Tejo, Crystal, and Vexstar worked together to understand the full scope of the problem. The Void Reapers were not just randomly destructive. They were trying to restore cosmic balance, but their corruption made them use violent methods instead of peaceful ones. The fragment of the first light was crucial to this process, but it had to be used correctly. Simply destroying the creatures would not solve the problem. More would keep appearing as long as the cosmic balance remained disrupted. The only real solution was to heal the corruption itself, to restore the Void Reapers to their original purpose as guardians rather than destroyers. It would be the most dangerous undertaking in galactic history, requiring them to work with the very creature they had been fighting. But if they succeeded, they would not only save Earth, but potentially heal a wound in the universe that had been bleeding for eons. As dawn broke over the damaged city, three unlikely allies prepared to attempt the impossible: a legendary hunter who had learned humility, an alien trader who had discovered the power of compassion, and a human veterinarian who refused to see any being as beyond redemption. Together they would either save the galaxy or die trying, but for the first time in his long career, Vexstar felt that dying for something greater than himself might actually be worth it. The revelation that the Void Reapers were corrupted guardians shattered Vexstar's understanding of everything he had lived for. 3,000 years of hunting suddenly felt like 3,000 years of genocide. The trophies in his ship were no longer symbols of victory, but evidence of cosmic crimes he could never undo. He sat in the ruins of a building outside Seoul, staring at the fragment of the first light that pulsed with ancient power in his hands. The crystal felt warm to the touch and seemed to respond to his emotions, glowing brighter when he felt hope and dimming when despair took hold. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time, a piece of creation itself that he had almost let fall into the wrong hands. "I cannot do this," he said to Taeho, who was examining the crystal with the same careful attention he gave to sick animals. "I am a destroyer, not a healer. Every life I have taken, every world I have terrorized, it all means I am the last being in the universe who should attempt something like this." Taeho looked up from his study of the fragment. "That is exactly why you are the right person to do it," he said with quiet conviction. "You understand the cost of destruction better than anyone. You know what happens when problems are solved with violence instead of wisdom." The human sat down beside the towering alien and spoke in the same gentle tone he used with frightened animals. "I have made mistakes too. Vexstar animals have died because I was not skilled enough or fast enough or smart enough to save them. Each failure taught me something important about how to do better next time." "Your failures were accidents," Vexstar replied bitterly. "Mine were intentional. I chose to kill. I chose to hunt. I chose to become the thing that parents used to frighten their children. And now you are choosing to heal," Taeho said. "That choice matters more than all the others." While they talked, Crystal was working to understand the technical aspects of what they were attempting. The ancient databases contained fragments of information about the ritual used to maintain cosmic balance, but much of the knowledge had been lost when the original guardians were corrupted. What she could piece together was both encouraging and terrifying. The healing process was possible, but it required absolute trust between the participants. The person carrying the fragment of the first light would have to lower all their mental defenses and share their life energy with the corrupted guardian. This created a connection that could heal the corruption, but also left the healer completely vulnerable if the Void Reaper was too far gone, or if the ritual failed. The backlash would destroy everyone involved. Not just their bodies, but their souls. The energy feedback would scatter their consciousness across multiple dimensions, leaving them aware, but unable to exist in any single reality. It was a fate worse than death. "There is something else," Crystal said as she studied the data. "The ritual requires the healer to experience all the memories of the corrupted guardian. Every moment of pain, every act of destruction, every life lost due to the corruption the human mind is not designed to handle. That kind of information overload." Vexstar stood up immediately. "Then I will do it. My mind is stronger than his, and I have already lived with the weight of the lives I have taken. One more burden will not break me." But Taeho shook his head. "It has to be me," he said calmly. "The fragment responds to intent, not strength. You have spent your life taking life. I have spent mine giving it. The crystal knows the difference." The argument that followed was unlike anything Crystal had ever witnessed. The most dangerous being in the galaxy pleading with a gentle veterinarian to let him take a risk that would almost certainly mean death. Vexstar tried every logical argument he could think of, while Taeho simply repeated his conviction that this was something he had to do. In the end, it was the fragment itself that settled the debate. When Vexstar tried to hold it, the crystal remained dark and cold. But when Taeho touched it, the entire thing blazed with light so bright it illuminated the ruined city like a second sun. The message was clear. The next morning, the Void Reaper returned as they had expected. It seemed drawn to the fragment like a moth to flame, but its behavior was different again. Instead of attacking immediately, it circled The area where they waited, its form flickering between dimensions as if it was fighting some internal battle. Teho stepped forward holding the fragment of the first light above his head. The crystal pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, casting patterns of light that seemed to calm the chaotic energy around the creature. "I know you are in pain," he called out. "I know the corruption burns inside you like poison. Let me help you remember what you were meant to be." The Void Reaper descended. Slowly, its burning eyes fixed on the fragment. As it came closer, its form began to stabilize, revealing glimpses of the majestic being it had once been. But the corruption fought back, sending waves of chaotic energy that made reality itself seem to bend and twist. When the creature was close enough to touch, Teho did something that made both his companions cry out in alarm. He reached out and placed his free hand directly on the Void Reaper's shifting form. The contact sent shockwaves through both beings as their life energies began to merge. The ritual had begun immediately. Teho was overwhelmed by sensations beyond human comprehension. He experienced the birth of the first stars through the Guardian's memories, felt the weight of maintaining balance across infinite realities, shared the joy of protecting countless civilizations from cosmic disasters. But he also experienced the moment when everything went wrong, the experiment with chaos energy that was meant to make the Guardians more powerful instead corrupted their very essence. Teho felt their confusion as their protective instincts became destructive urges, their wisdom became madness, their love for life became hunger for destruction. The pain was indescribable. It was the agony of watching yourself become everything you had sworn to protect against, multiplied across eons of existence. Teho's human mind began to crack under the pressure of so much suffering, but he held on, driven by the same stubbornness that made him stay up all night. With a dying Animalvextor watched in horror as Teho began to convulse, the fragment's light growing unstable as the human's life force was drained by the connection. He could see that the ritual was working. The Void Reaper's form was becoming more stable, its chaotic energy settling into more natural patterns. But the cost was destroying the one being who had shown him what compassion truly meant. Without thinking, Vexstar stepped forward and placed his own hands on both Teho and the creature. The three-way connection that formed was like being struck by lightning. The legendary hunter's consciousness was pulled into the maelstrom of shared memory and pain, but his presence stabilized the link. For the first time in his life, Vexstar truly understood what he had been destroying. He experienced the memories of guardians he had killed, beings who had been trying to protect the cosmos even as corruption made them into monsters. He felt their desperation, their confusion, their grief at becoming the opposite of what they were meant to be. The weight of his crimes should have crushed him, but instead of despair he felt something else. Understanding, forgiveness. The corrupted guardians had known what they were becoming, but they had been unable to stop themselves. They did not hate him for ending their suffering. They were grateful. As the three beings shared their memories and life force, something miraculous began to happen. The corruption that had poisoned the Void Reaper for eons began to burn away like frost in sunlight. The creature's true form emerged, beautiful beyond description, a being of pure starlight whose very presence made the air sing with harmony. The ritual reached its climax as the fragment of the first light dissolved into pure energy that flowed through all three participants. The cosmic balance that had been disrupted for so long snapped back into place with a sound like the universe taking its first breath. When the light faded, three beings knelt together in the ruins of soul, no longer the same as they had been before the former Void Reaper, now restored to its original purpose as a cosmic guardian, looked at its saviors with eyes full of ancient wisdom and infinite gratitude. Vexstar knelt not in defeat but in humility, his legendary pride replaced by understanding of his true place in the cosmic order. And Teho knelt because his legs could no longer support him after channeling energies meant for beings far greater than any human. But he was smiling because once again he had helped heal something that was broken, and that was all that mattered to him. The restored cosmic guardian, who now calls itself Daleshan, becomes a teacher rather than a threat. It shares ancient knowledge about the true nature of the universe, explaining how different forms of life serve different purposes in the cosmic order. Some beings are meant to be predators, others prey, and still others guardians who maintain the balance between them. All roles are equally important and deserving of respect. Vexstar faces the hardest decision of his long life. He could continue being the apex hunter, using his newfound wisdom to hunt only truly dangerous threats, or he could abandon his old identity entirely and seek a new purpose. The choice becomes clear when he realizes that the galaxy doesn't need another predator. It needs more beings like Tejo, who see beyond surface appearances to the truth beneath. The transformation of the legendary apex hunter sends shockwaves across the galaxy. Bounty hunters and warriors who idolized Vexstar are confused and angry at his apparent weakness. But others, particularly those who have been oppressed by stronger beings, see hope in his change. If the ultimate predator can learn compassion, perhaps there is a chance for a more peaceful galaxy. Tejo returns to his quiet life on Earth, but his impact on galactic affairs continues to grow. Beings from across the stars seek him out, drawn by stories of the human who taught the apex hunter to kneel. He becomes known not as a warrior or ruler, but as a healer of both bodies and souls. His simple veterinary clinic becomes an informal embassy where different species learn to understand each other. Crystal chooses to stay on Earth as an ambassador, helping to prepare humanity for its eventual integration into galactic civilization. She works with Tejo to establish protocols for peaceful first contact, ensuring that Earth's entry into the cosmic community will be based on cooperation rather than conquest. Together, they create a new model for how different species can coexist. The story concludes with Vexstar visiting Tejo 1 year later. The former apex hunter has spent months traveling the galaxy, seeking out the places where his past hunts caused the most damage. He works to restore balance where he can and to make amends for past mistakes. When he kneels before Tejo, it is not in defeat but in gratitude. The human veterinarian who sees every being as worthy of compassion has shown him that true strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the wisdom to heal and protect. The universe watches as two very different beings, one human and one alien, demonstrate that understanding and compassion can triumph over violence and fear. Their friendship becomes a symbol of hope for a galaxy that has known too much conflict. And in veterinary clinics, hunting grounds, and council chambers across the stars, beings begin to ask themselves a simple but revolutionary question. What if strength was measured not by what you could destroy, but by what you could save?